So, Elle Duncan talked basketball. Elle Duncan talked again about the Caitlin Clark versus Paige Bueckers situation. And
one ESPN segment simply established the Elle Duncan dared to put the basketball world on fire. To contrast UConn's comeback star, Paige. Salutations to Caitlin, the WNBA's golden girl. Fans are now wondering about Clark. Everything, including Duncan's reputation and the never-ending comparisons, but this. Duncan, what's everyone talking about? Stated that she would not compare them at that time. Clark's name was mentioned 10 times in the blowback is greater the next breath. More than anyone anticipated.
That's the reality of the situation. Caitlin Clark's name is brought up because it's going to get clicks. There's a reason why. That's like saying, why not talk about Michael Jordan without talking about LeBron, or talking about LeBron without talking about Michael Jordan?
The ESPN segment that this firestorm wasn't caused by you alone. Elle Duncan's standard sports analysis. Sharp basketball takes a stride for her into what quickly turned into a dispute. She launched her prime time segment by using a seemingly diplomatic approach, even though I'm not particularly interested in placing those two in opposition to one another. However, what transpired next transformed the basketball world. Inverted
basketball take, or if this was a whole Caitlin Clark was Paige Bueckers, or Paige Bueckers Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark. Paige Bueckers was the most hyped high school player ever. I mean that before Juju ever, but
seconds after asserting that she wouldn't draw parallels with what Duncan said, the name of Caitlin Clark twice. However, 10 times in quick succession, the paradox was so blatant that the part was clipped by viewers before sports even concluded airing. Always on the lookout for drama, Twitter had a field day where the timestamps are displayed. The abrupt shift from having no parallels to everything about Caitlin.
Clark on Prime TV is unnecessary and annoying. Like, why is Caitlin's name brought up? Talk about Paige. We want to talk about Paige. Caitlin's name is brought up because it gets clicks.
The sections. The timing couldn't be better. Disputed Bueckers had recently returned to form at UConn, losing by 28 points to a highly regarded adversary rather than concentrating on this tale of resurgence. The topic of conversation instantly changed to Clark contrasts Duncan's findings. Although well-meaning, it provoked discussion regarding the bias in media portrayal of women's basketball, which is what made this especially. Only a few weeks ago, the situation was explosive. Previously, Duncan had been criticized for WNBA legend Cheryl Swoops is misquoted about Clark's influence on the Indiana. The incident's fever had just begun to subside down when this fresh dispute started. The community for basketball was already on edge, and this reminded me of.
And so while I'm not really interested in pitting those two against each other, I'll talk specifically about what I think is really impactful about Paige Bueckers. You're Caitlin for Caitlin, and the Caitlin is what Caitlin about Caitlin.
So obviously, comparing Caitlin to Paige Bueckers and just mentioning the name Caitlin Clark.
The structure of the segments itself turned into a talking point for detractors. Saw the way Duncan began sentences concerning Bueckers, but ultimately conclude them with Clark mentions a tweet that went viral. Down the 2-minute clip that demonstrates more people mentioned Clark's name than Boo's real accomplishments, even informally. Fans became aware of the disparity in ESPN's. The production crew reportedly attempted to course-correct mid-segment transition to fantastic highlight reel. However, the harm was completed. The chyron at the base of the screen continues to compare stars. Regardless of Duncan's first denial, this apparent inconsistency merely served to media commentators covering the fire jumped on the highlighting the fact that it demonstrated a greater issue with sports reporting the must continuously evaluate players, particularly in women's athletics, frequently undercuts own accomplishments. Duncan's portion, possibly inadvertently, became an ideal example of this phenomena. The response on social media to Duncan's part was quick and powerful. Within a few hours, Let Paige Be began popular on Twitter with followers of both camps venting their annoyance. Twitter is typically polarized on basketball. Rare unity was found in the majority of concerns, exposing what they perceived as a fabricated story. Constructing validated reports of former participants rushed into the fray. College. Both Bueckers and Clark's teammates told each other personal tales regarding the amazing journey of a former UConn player. We don't know why the player's tweet went viral. Equate all male players with Wanyama, therefore. Why is women's basketball being treated this way? More than 100,000 people liked the post in only. The backlash over 3 hours wasn't limited to. The comparison itself was around. Just now, Time Bueckers finished her return game following an injury battle, releasing a striking stat line that fans believed that it deserved its own spotlight. This moment is being overshadowed by Clark analogies undercut what ought to have been a testament to tenacity. The women's basketball community on Reddit burst into several mega strands. One article titled "The Issue with ESPN's Analysis of Women's Basketball Coverage. Each time a person accomplishments were eclipsed by." Users shared pointless comparisons. Excerpts from earlier sections demonstrating a pattern of comparable coverage, even informal basketball aficionados who don't play the game often. Discourse into the discussion. The respect their journey with a hash number began to acquire popularity, with numerous highlighting the ways in which masculine athletes are permitted to leave their own legacy without frequent comparisons. This generated a more extensive conversation about media coverage of the dispute in women's sports. Spread to college on TikTok. Basketball content producers went viral. Videos that examined the first part, the author's interpretation of Duncan's work, selection and frequency obtained over 2. The comment areas have received millions of views. Turned became platforms for fans to discuss their reasons for observing both players develop on their own, which is what led to this response that is distinct from that of normal sports controversies were its enduring strength. Unlike most deaths caused by social media storms, down after this conversation for 24 hours kept changing. Fans started putting together internet campaigns to commemorate individual accomplishments of both players, purposefully avoiding analogies with anger wasn't limited to Duncan. It expanded to include more sports media. Ecosystem enthusiasts began to monitor how frequently other experts made comparable spreadsheets, comparisons, and infographics that show how frequently this data-driven strategy provided the critique more weight than the average fan. Anger that dismantles the historical. The excitement surrounding both players suggests a intriguing contrast in their ascent to fame. Paige Bueckers became a occurrence that occurred during her time in high school, continuously ranked as the country's highest prospects. Highlight reels from Hopkins High School previously went viral, even prevalent among women's. Her basketball games were shown on ESPN. A unusual occurrence for girls across basketball in high school during those. Every level was controlled by early childhood educators. She helped the United States basketball team win, receiving several Player of the Year honors, and attracted the interest of major programs over the nation. Her dedication to UConn was thought to be the ideal complement to most eagerly anticipated prospect going to the most. The expectations for the renowned program were extraordinary, with some referring to her as the Diana Taurasi's next performance before she played a one college match in the interim. Caitlin Clark's journey took a distinct route. Even though she was heavily recruited, she didn't maintain the same level of national attention in playing in high school in Iowa. She put up amazing figures but did not receive the same publicity that brings her choose to play for Iowa while remaining at home. Was honored locally, but it didn't produce, similar to the UConn, the same national buzz. Dedication. The story changed drastically when they were in college. Career builders delivered on their promises, being the first freshman right away to be named the year's top national player, but her progression was stopped by injuries. Compelled to observe from the sidelines, When Clark's fame started to grow. Play style, no deep three-pointers. Examined passes and explosive scoring. Invented a brand new style of basketball. Famous. What's especially? The way their trajectories diverged is interesting. Bu's initial supremacy was more conventional efficacy, rating accuracy, playmaking, and systemic success. With her, Clark transformed the game. Unprecedented scoring and logo threes. Numbers. Both strategies were successful, but Clark's approach garnered greater notice. In the age of social media, grabbing marketing data provides an intriguing. High school students' stories had more media coverage and Instagram followers. Clark was in their sophomore year in college, had outperformed her in each categories. Clark's games began to record viewership during Bu's absence due to injury, permitted the focus to change. Their tales collectively depict two various models of basketball celebrity. Bueckers represented the conventional route, elite program for early recognition. With instant success, Clark developed a new, staying local and experimenting with the blueprint. Unheard of independence and connectivity. With admirers using a more contemporary method of play. The Elle Duncan dispute revealed a deeper problem that women's basketball is facing. Coverage that extends beyond player. Contrast. The media's ongoing requirement to establish comparisons and competitions is actually impeding the organic sports. The main emphasis of growth networks is identifying the next major plot point that they aren't seeing the real stories taking place in front of their eyes. Let's examine the figures for the 2023-24 women's basketball season. 65%. Among the top players, headlines were comparing this player to another is more than simply Clark and Beer. It's turn become a structural problem when Cameron Brink's primary style of play has been compared to when Angel Reese reaches 20, A.A. Wilson. She's measured against Sylvia in terms of rebounds. These ongoing comparisons are recorded by FS. Reduce the individuality of each player. Inputs to the game and their effects on viewer impression is important because a recent research on sports media found that fans recall these fabricated parallels greater than the real accomplishments. For example, more people might remember that when Bueckers and Clark were contrasted, they could state Bu's real numbers from her return game, which produces a warped perspective of each player individually, achievements, and establishes impractical expectations for up-and-coming talent. The economic ramifications are equally with relation to sponsorship agreements, and opportunities for marketing are becoming more and more connected to these fabricated rivalries instead of a separate merit industry. According to insiders, brands are more inclined to make investments on athletes that participate in creating an engaging narrative of comparison compared to those who stand alone in their excellence. Leads to an unfair economic environment where special abilities are maybe disregarded only because they not suitable for easy comparison. College recruitment narratives are experiencing the consequences of high school. Players say they are under more pressure to fit in into current comparisons. One top recently, a recruit revealed how coaches maintained requesting that she demonstrate her game following current stars rather than nurturing her. This cookie-cutter method of unique style has the potential to hinder innovation in the sport and can even restrict the variety of styles of playing that we observe at increased levels of participation on social media. Another concerning trend is revealed by patterns. Postings highlighting personal accomplishments receive much less traction than those making parallels between players. This starts a loop in which media outlets feel forced to tell stories using contrasting stories to motivate participation, which further sustains the issue with the metrics-driven character of the media of today. Makes it hard to break this cycle even when reporters acknowledge its detrimental impact on the global basketball community. Has observed two leagues in Europe that historically emphasized individual player development is experiencing a surge of comparative coverage in the American manner. This change runs the risk of globalizing a problematic method of addressing women's basketball coverage and may have an effect on how the game creates global television. Off the record, producers acknowledge that they feel caught up in this pattern, while they acknowledge the pressures on issue ratings and metrics from social media encourage them to. These narratives of comparison are become a prophecy that comes true on its own. The more they compare, the more people watch, anticipate it, and the more difficult it gets to escape this trend as much as possible. The worrying thing is that these player development is impacted by comparisons. Young athletes are becoming more concentrated on simulating current stars instead than acquiring their own special skills. According to coaches, players are more worried about blending in predefined molds rather than investigating their innate abilities that could result in a uniformity in playing styles, possibly impeding athletic performance. Evolution of these ongoing comparisons may put needless strain on athletes with established careers report, feeling irritated by the fact that their accomplishments are always evaluated through the success of another player's perspective. This culture of constant comparison can impact performance and mental health, posing new difficulties for gamers who are already subjected to severe examination. The repercussions of Duncan's remarks has prompted an important discussion regarding the prospects for the industry of basketball coverage. According to analysts, this might be a tipping point in the way that media outlets handle player accounts of the overwhelmingly devoted response has compelled networks to reevaluate their approach, with some already putting new rules into effect for player similarities. Disclosed by ESPN insiders that there are ongoing internal talks on creating more impartial coverage mechanisms, such as allocating equal airtime devoted to personal accomplishments, restricting the use of comparative analysis until intimately related to the strategy of games, and highlighting distinctive player qualities instead of making forced analogies. According to reports, networks are doing the same, realizing the need for significant change. Additionally, sponsors and brands are reconsidering how they deal with marketing. Executives admit that the ever-present Clark Brewer comparative narratives could potentially be restricting their reach. There is an increasing acknowledgement that honoring individual